So, hi everyone. My name is Vanessa. I'm the CEO and co-founder of District Technologies. We're a mobile-first platform that somewhat bridges the gap of digital and physical placemaking, the topic of the panel today. So very excited to have my panelists here. I think maybe if everyone from that side wants to move a bit this way, if there's the least amount of audience there, it would make it a lot easier for us to speak in one direction and moderate the panel. So we're going to try and do this. And yes, delighted to be here. For those of you that don't know me, you can expect some more challenging questions and deeper insights. We're going to try and take the conversation a step further than maybe you would on a typical real estate event. And I will first start off with letting my panelists introduce themselves, because I think that's always the nicest. And then we're going to speak about what does placemaking mean? You know, what is the definition? What do we define it as? How do we bridge this, everything being digital and physical placemaking divide? And then several case studies around the world of maybe examples that we think are great. So without further ado, I'll have the panel introduce themselves and sit down. Thank you very much. Do you want to start, Barry?
Hi. My name is Barry Jessup. I'm a director and owner of a company called First Base. We are reasonably significant mixed-use urban developers. So we focus on building long-term communities in towns and cities, particularly at the moment in London, Brighton, Bristol, Oxford, and Milton Keynes.
It's interesting. So my name is Gemma John, director and founder of Human City. We work in the kind of social value space, so we help developers and investors connect to local communities and help design and demonstrate they've listened to community interests, as well as obviously attract footfall for the clients we work with in the context of retail, workplace, residential and education spaces.
Hello, I'm Sofia Hagen from Design House Liberty. I'm design partner there, so I'm the main design lead of various projects in London and China and Dubai, actually. We have a new one in Dubai. And we focus on basically anything from commercial, residential to retail, as well as urban planning and placemaking in all of those countries.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Great to have such an esteemed panel here. I think the first question that we'd all like to understand better is what do we mean with placemaking maybe 20 years ago to what it is now, and how do you define it?
So perhaps I'll kick off. Placemaking might be a sort of popular phrase at the moment, but really it's been at the heart of all strong communities forever. It's certainly not new. I think the only thing that's really changed in the last 20 years is with the dawn of the digital era. We find that the blurring between the different parts of our lives has just accelerated. So there's now virtually no delineation between the way that we work, the way we play, and the way that we live. So from a placemaking perspective, that has created some physical challenges in terms of the way that we actually create the buildings, design the buildings, but most importantly, perhaps design all of the spaces between the buildings and improve the connectivity. So for me, now in the post-digital age, placemaking is really about setting a community up for long-term success and allowing them to live and work in the way that they want to in the 21st century.
That's definitely quotable. I hope you've written it down. What do you think, Gemma?
Yeah, absolutely. I think digital technology has disrupted exactly blurred the boundaries between workplace and living. It's disrupted a lot of the kind of models we'd otherwise rely on for retail, residential spaces and workplace. But also now it's an integral part of placemaking. So digital technology is providing a platform in which people can engage online, and understanding those online engagements is a key part of understanding how we think about our spaces. So it's about thinking about placemaking now in the digital era across both physical and digital platforms.
I agree to both, and I think from a design perspective, the challenge became much more in creating an experience actually to draw the people to physically come to the spaces. So placemaking has to be more than it used to be, because people can see everything digitally anyway. You don't need to go anywhere to experience. So it's much harder for, I think, all of us involved to make decent, high quality placemaking that would generate what it used to do, like create communities, generate footfall, etc. So it's a bigger challenge for the designer, but at the same time it became easier for us too, because we can work with tech companies that you know, work hand in hand with us, and the tools became easier to apply.
Fantastic. And let's talk about tools for a minute. So I think we have a good understanding of where we see placemaking going in the 21st century based on all your answers right now. So it's about creating experiences, bringing people to locations that may have otherwise been somewhat underutilized before through, I would argue, experiences, really. That's driving what people are looking for. No longer big brands or retail shops, but experiences like cool bars or restaurants or community places to go to, events to connect with. Where in your schemes or with your clients, do you see any great examples of tools of how to get people maybe through the digital world to the physical spaces?
Sofia. Like one example, we're currently working on this tower in Guangzhou in China, and it's for a huge fashion client, huge fashion company. It's in a new commercial district of Guangzhou it doesn't exist yet. It's just full of construction sites. And to generate the footfall and actually attract the public, we worked very closely with them and landscape architects and artists and art brokers to create like a whole sculpture garden down to the main lobby. It's not just an office building. We had to basically create an art space full of selfie moments. They're really into their selfies, so that brings us back to
Instagram aha moment.
Everywhere, like all over the place. Art is just there basically to serve your selfie, and the landscape is a means of getting there. So that's one example.
I'm sure the artists would disagree.
They would, totally. They hate it, yeah. But, well, I'm sorry.
That's reality of what you're doing in terms of driving placemaking, encouraging selfies and getting the location back out there to get more people to come. And there's many examples of that.
Yeah. We've had artists who actually refused to put their art there because they don't want to be seen as that. It's commercialized for them. So, but you find some who do agree. So.
And that's happening also in retail, is that actually murals, art, exhibits are becoming part of that experience that people come to retail spaces to enjoy. But in answer to your question, I would say that thinking about the online engagements and physical interactions seamlessly right from the start. So thinking about your customer value proposition as a business, what are you offering your customer? And thinking about that offer across those platforms, which means that one is not a detraction from the other. You're thinking about the services you might provide online, the kind of convenience that your customer might be looking for in the context, say, a residential now space where build to rent is also about concierge, about this kind of hospitality, F&B kind of offer. How is that all provided to your customers online? And how does that then integrate with the kind of physical touch points that you have in your building, whether you have a reception desk, whether you don't, whether you've got private access point, whether you've got public access points for community offers. Those two have to be thought through together. So one is not a detraction, it's very much thinking about those.
It's like you could do our sales pitch for District. Seamless experiences are key, right? So wherever your user experience journey is going, for the users, they want to be able to get in and out of a door when they have a door. They want to be able to get up when they want to get up to the office. Removing friction in your day-to-day experience is everything we're looking at very, very closely. And I think it ties in perfectly with placemaking, because if you have an amazing experience in a certain location, then you're more likely to go back. And that's where you win. What do you think, Barry?
Without giving Vanessa too much of a plug, I think where District really helps is not only in improving that connectivity and allowing you to reach out to the broader community and to connect people, but also I think in allowing you to use space more efficiently. So now I can't take this from a micro position to a macro position. One of the biggest challenges in real estate and placemaking is affordability. That's across the board, whether that's retailers not being able to afford to be on high streets or in shopping centres, or it's the average desk size now being reducing all the time in offices, or it's people not being able to get on the housing ladder. Digital has a massive role to play in making real estate really efficient. Apologies. It is a massively inefficient sector at the moment. I think we are dinosaurs, frankly, and it's great to see so many people here today with so many great ideas. Now, an average building is used around about 36% of the time, which is criminal when you consider for most people, it's the most valuable asset either we own or we rent, and it's the most valuable commodity as a country that we have, because we're not building any more land. So I think the use of digital technology can have a massive impact on using that space more efficiently, therefore reducing the cost, which allows you to be more creative with the mixture of uses and the users you put into the space. So I think it's crucial.
I was going to say that raises the point about the data, going back to your question about tools and the data that actually people are able to collect now, that we're able to hack into things like Facebook and Twitter and kind of gather that data to better understand that customer journey. It's really key.
So let's play devil's advocate, because I always think, you know, we need to be disagreeing on panels with some things, and so far we've all been agreeing, which is probably a good thing in terms of where we're going with the market. But in terms of playing devil's advocate, what do you see some of the challenges are, or the maybe negativity around connecting digital, you know, connecting everything with a digital platform, or data privacy concerns? Do you see that with your clients or with your developments, or is it something that you find is now commonly accepted?
It's definitely not commonly accepted. I think there's a massive concern around the use of data, and there'll be lots of people talking about that today. So that is a major hurdle we need to overcome. But most of that is just through lack of education and the fact that people don't really understand what benefits we can bring in having access to some of that data. So it's still a massive hurdle. I think we're only going to gain the trust of people by demonstrating it, probably in relatively small scale examples, and then just assuming and just hoping that people pick that up, and you know, frankly, that's the whole FOMO concept. People will then want to have what the community next to them have.
Any other comments?
Articulating some of the challenges. Yes, one of the biggest challenges we're finding is valuation. You know, if you're providing all this amazing experience online, or opportunities to connect in the building online, one or the other, you know, beforehand or afterwards, and it's partly the experience that people are attracted to in your space, how does that get valued in very kind of real terms? So what's the value of your asset, and how does kind of that experience get incorporated as part of the valuation process? So we're beginning to do a bit of that work, particularly in kind of the disruptive areas of residential, alternative residential sector around co-living, and how you value a co-living asset based on its opportunity to connect in that space and elsewhere on kind of online platforms via a membership service, which is a kind of long process, but I think it's worth doing to kind of shift the kind of the frameworks in which we work in along to align with where we are.
That's brings me to a company which is actually not part of our company, but Dara, our founder, made, and like friends of mine founded basically. It's Viva House. It's a co-living platform of micro co-living units, and they have created their own app, which is basically summarizes everything you said now. So people can connect because they have shared spaces, and then they have their own private living pod. So I'm kind of making sales now for the wrong company, but we all work together. But basically, that's what they started instigating, and they're very successful. It's very new on the market yet, but they're really successful, and people start to actually warm up to it. And when I think of our Design House Liberty side of things, people are still more, like Barry said, they're a bit scared of the tech, they're a bit scared of the digital and the data, because they just hear stories about what can happen to their data. Whereas they all want tech in their buildings. They all come to us and say, we want tech. And they don't know what it means. They just want a screen somewhere. And we're like, well, it's not just a screen. Why don't you actually, in your commercial building, even create your own apps? So you have 2,000 people working there. They could all be connected to each other and exchange their data and exchange the projects they're working on, etc. So it could both in residential and commercial sectors go broader, but it is a matter of education, yeah.
Yeah, so District's platform works with residential. We have co-living clients, we have co-working clients, we have big commercial campuses and towers as clients. What we're looking for still, which I'm very excited about as a potential, is like a neighborhood client or a city client. Could we connect the public realm and much more than just individual campuses or businesses? Because the technology could do all of that. The challenge is, I think, getting like, where are the case studies in the world where we've taken neighborhoods or cities and activated them through co-working, co-living, events, services, platforms that have really become successful? I think we're still waiting to see. Like, there is no, as far as I know, I'd love to ask, and maybe the audience have ideas, but we're very much looking for these new cities, new developments, and maybe they're going to happen outside of big cities. What about urban population growth? What are your thoughts around that, Barry?
I think you're right. The short answer is, apart from the very high-profile case studies around the world in places like Abu Dhabi and Toronto and places like that. We haven't really seen that many large communities built around the digital platform. It's definitely coming. I think it will be adopted on a smaller scale first, but I think that it probably will happen in slightly edgier areas. As you know, we're trying to do something very similar to this in Brighton, where we really engage with the broader community across all of the different sectors. But if I can link that back to the previous question, because I think we talked about the issues around valuation. A lot of startups here today will be concerned around how you monetize a really good idea and a good product. And I think the real estate industry has the same issue. So again, you talk about retail experiences, and a lot of online retailers now creating offline experiences, absolutely crucial to their business, but then establishing how much rent they should pay for the space, or how do you monetize an online sale in a real world environment is a real challenge. But I think it's only by cracking that I think we'll really be able to accelerate the delivery. And I think there are some good ideas here today, around potentially the use of blockchain and tracking transactions that can help to monetize some of those areas. But I think we'll need to see a step change in some of those technologies before we see an acceleration in delivery.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, because we've been speaking a lot about the user experience and people, and placemaking is all about people, and I'm very happy that we were able to take that route, and it's all enabled through technology, because that's what I believe smart means. So smart buildings and smart cities should focus on the user experience and enable it through tech, and throwing a load of tech into cities or buildings isn't necessarily helpful. Do you have examples of situations where technology or hardware in buildings didn't affect the people and therefore wasn't valuable?
I think it's a bit of a question around smart locks at the moment, and actually whether and kind of location tracking devices. Of course, there's data protection around that, but the fact that it's digitally or kind of technologically possible, is it something that people want? And there tends to be kind of an age-related kind of division, where some people want it, some people don't. Some people want to embrace all this technology, and others don't. So I think a kind of controversial example is Singapore. Singapore does this kind of smart living, kind of smart nation stuff incredibly well. I don't know, I'm sure many of you have been to Singapore, but it's very easy to get around. Even the public libraries are kind of all into digital citizenship and trying to promote and support citizens of all ages to become much more tech savvy. But Singapore is also very top down as a nation. So those differences are ones that other countries maybe have to kind of accommodate and understand in order to kind of tailor smart solutions to specific needs in a context. And there has been kind of concern around smart locks and whether you can use your phone, should be using your phone, what happens if your phone runs out of battery. All of these things are kind of, you can overcome. But it's about kind of, I guess, partly education, partly kind of working with the kind of customer needs. So yeah, it's it's an interesting area.
It's the same with like systems that are applied to your house, which are just lighting and sound, anything you can control. If you don't have your settings set up, like nobody will actually use it because people can't be bothered to learn how. It's becoming too complex, so they just switch it on or off and that's it. We had that a lot. When we try to make the smartest building ever, it's like nobody uses it.
I also use that same example. If I click 10 times on an app to turn my light on and off, or I click once on the light switch, what are people going to do? The one click is always what you want to do, remove friction, not add friction in your day-to-day.
And I think it is interesting because a lot of digital technologies, when they come along, there can be a real lag in terms of the impact they have on real estate, and they can make things worse for quite a long time. Let me give you an obvious but a really simple example. Sort of Amazon and Amazon deliveries are now a major headache for all real estate owners, whether you're at home or you're in an office. And the technology is just now starting to catch up in terms of actually, well, how do you then get that delivered in a more efficient way, whether it's drone deliveries, etc., or whether it's actually having specifically accessible security spaces at home. I was over in Seattle in November, and we're now looking at installing their latest technology, which allows you, the Amazon delivery guy or girl, actually into your home, all tracked by video camera. So there's some basic things that I think the real estate industry needs to do to catch up with some of the advances that we're seeing in the digital realm.
What are those basic things?
Well,
top three.
Sure, that's a great question. Look, the three things we're looking at, so most of our developments are 8 to 15 years long. So depending on what your belief is around the advent of autonomous vehicles, it's somewhere in that period, I suspect. I think it'll be the front end, other people might think it's the back end. Interestingly, that has a fundamental impact on placemaking and on real estate, because actually the old adage of location, location, location becomes much less relevant if we have a totally fluid transport connectivity that doesn't necessarily rely on public transport, but that also allows you to entirely define your journey. So you might choose to take the journey to a party in a vehicle dressed as a bar. You might just between meetings, you might order a vehicle that's designed to have TV screens or whatever you need to do your work. So that fundamentally changes the importance of location, and that interestingly will have a major impact on the real estate that we're building.
Transport, autonomous and trains
absolutely
significantly affect placemaking, and they, if ever have. Yep. Right, the beginning of cities has all been around rivers and canals. That's where people could get to easily on boats. So nothing really has changed. Yeah.
And once you re-digitize that whole network, the scope is absolutely fantastic. The ability just to decide that I'm making this up, every Saturday and Sunday you're just going to close Oxford Street, but all the cars know exactly where they need to go to do other things at that time. And the ability also to digitally tax vehicles means you can run much more efficiently in terms of times of day and liquidity of traffic. All of that then has a real impact on where you're building your buildings and how you're creating your long-term communities.
A second or third, I will just tap in here, but public participation, that's the thing that I think is going to become much easier to do and also kind of more expected. Because data, the new technologies enabling people to collect more, developers to collect more data, but also kind of pushing companies to be a little bit more transparent and participatory in how they design and build. And of course, that's going to have a knock-on impact on the decisions they're able to make or should be making. But also, of course, technology is changing, and I think you're talking about the future. So as technology changes and allows for greater participation, of course, that's going to reflect back on the decisions that are made about how technology is used. So it's kind of like a cyclical kind of push and pull. So I think the future is going to be quite different from now for all those reasons that technologically we're taken to different places, but also people are going to have greater means of participation in decisions that are made.
Great. I think that sort of very nicely summarizes a lot of what we've been speaking about, looking to the future and looking backwards for placemaking digitally and physically. I think we have a good 5 minutes or so to do some questions with the audience. So if anyone has any questions for our lovely panel, please raise your hand, and I'm sure there'll be a microphone coming around in a minute. Great. I think we'll start over here with this gentleman, and then Pete. Can't choose you as number one. Oh, it's okay. You do your question first, and then we'll get this guy over here. Sorry.
Hi, everybody. I'm Pete, CTO at District. So I was going to ask a technical question, but Vanessa's done a very good job of plugging us already. My question is, so I guess Barry and a few of you have touched on kind of the blurring of digital and physical spaces. I guess what I want to know is this going to become an issue for, with well-being being such a hot topic at the moment, is it going to become an issue? And what are we doing to create spaces in the physical where people can get away from the digital?
It's a great question. I think the short answer is yes. I suspect everybody in this room suffers from those blurring of the lines. There's no doubt about that. Interestingly, our approach to that is a little bit digital, mostly old-fashioned. So we're lucky enough to work in Brighton on a number of schemes. Anybody that's been to Brighton will know it's very hilly. So we make no apologies for building steps and various other bits into the everyday lives of people who are working in our developments. I also think there are other ways that you can then overlay the two. So through great digital connection, you can ensure that people are reminded about exercise. They can have access to space that enables them to exercise. And equally, Brighton has a fantastic, both a green agenda, but also a healthy food and nutrition agenda. So we're able to, partly through District, but also just through hopefully being a good neighbour, tap into a lot of the providers of those services and allow them to come into the offices, allow them to come into the homes and actually create that well-being agenda.
And I also think well-being can be solved with good design. Like this whole problem doesn't actually have to exist. If you provide spaces can make you feel well, and they can actually contribute to well-being, and that's one of the attributes of placemaking too. That's one of what it should cover, is general well-being for communities or like individual users.
And the other end of the extreme is digital inclusivity. So there are people that just don't have access to Wi-Fi, landlines and various things. So as things go online, they need to have access to spaces where they can have the opportunity of going online and transacting. Yeah.
I think that's right, but I think what's really exciting about that is about the only thing I've disagreed with people on so far is the age bias towards the adoption of a technology, and I think particularly digital technology in residential sector is crucial for the more elderly population, and actually that should allow us to bring the more elderly population back into urban centres, which then has a massive amount of social benefits that it would take me too long to explain. So I think there are some real opportunities that are well-being based, but also social value based, to make sure our communities are much more sustainable.
Great. Question over here, please.
Hi, I come from technology background, new to PropTech. It's my first PropTech conference.
So tell us your name and your company.
Okay, Mohammed Salam from Hop Homes. My question is around the use of technology for placemaking. And the worst thing I see is, as a user, as a consumer, is every new city I go to, a new app to download for parking, a new app to get into a building. Is the industry thinking of a universal way of addressing this problem? Because we're ending up with, like, if we did buy some products downstairs, you just end up having like 10 different providers not integrated with each other, and it just makes the process very difficult and full of friction. So that's first part of the question. And the second part is, what about segmentation of your customer base as well? Because not everyone behaves the same way. To the gentleman's view on the older generation and the newer generation, how do you deal with that? So first one is about, is there a universal way of dealing with this problem? And the second one is about segmentation of customers, and how do you do that?
I mean, the first question is just around aggregation, isn't it? And I think it's inevitable, and every other sort of tech sector has seen it. I think we'll see it here as well, and I think it's crucial. But I'm a big believer in customer choice, and the reality is, as soon as you have anything that creates transaction friction, one of you guys is going to come along and sort that out. So I think that will happen as a matter of course. I think segmentation is really interesting, and I think it goes back to this inclusivity. And when we're creating a place, today we're deliberately talking about property and tech, but of course it is about the people. So it's about how do you make sure that the people are getting what they're getting, getting what they want, and you can't ignore a lot of those long-form social values that communities have. So I think for us, the whole digital side is important, but we can't forget the old-fashioned approaches to make sure that there are meeting places and natural bump-in and collision places designed into our schemes, etc. That's how you try and cross that divide.
For us, it's about segmentation and communication. So once we spend an awful lot of time with local people on the ground, just getting to understand who those actors are, who stakeholders are, and then building up a profile around the people we meet. It's sometimes age-related profiles, it's sometimes completely different groups. It tends to be very much kind of behavior-based groups of people we identify to help create a path forward for our clients. But then it's about communication strategies. So once we hand that information over, how does the management team, how do the operators actually implement some of those ideas? It's very much about gaining an understanding of how to, so what do those profiles, how do they make sense? How can we enable the management team operators to engage with those on their own terms in their own way, so there's a future relationship.
Great, and maybe I'll add on the universal app topic, because it's very close to my heart and what we do. I think real estate has one of the biggest challenges compared to other industries where startups have become really successful just launching cities and doing their own thing because they don't have gatekeepers. So if you're a pure B2C app, you can just, with enough supply, launch a city. So in terms of, say, your Uber, you need supply of cars, you can launch a city. If you're a restaurant pre-ordering food app, you can launch with restaurants. With real estate as your clients, your B2B business, you have these gatekeepers that control entire neighborhoods and buildings, and they're competitors of each other. And you, of course, as a startup, want to work with all of them, but there's natural competitiveness that is very blocking. So one of the lessons, one of the things we're doing, or I'm spending a lot of time trying to be more open and more collaborative with the industry, saying, I'm happy to work with my competitors. I'm happy to work with any client or building or neighborhood or space that will give us the opportunity to. And a lot of what I believe is people should be more open and more collaborative and not closed. And so this is something that, hopefully everyone, because they're here and we're at events like these, is starting to do more so. And it can only be a good thing. There's only more advantages with the industry becoming more open to collaboration. Any more questions?
Hi.
Yes, here's one.
Oh, sorry, I've got...
Oh, sorry. Yes, please. You go first.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Kingma. I work for Round Hill Ventures, which is a PropTech-focused VC. I'm incredibly interested by sustainability. So this is more of a follow-up question to the first question that was asked in the, about sustainability. How are you guys fundamentally measuring and communicating the impact on sustainability that your the companies that either you're managing or you are partnering with are creating on the real estate assets?
Who wants to take the question?
Question, and that's the $20 million question. It's hard. We're actually working in retail at the moment on that very question, which is, so once you've considered all the local community needs and kind of got segmentation kind of sorted and who your audience is across different stakeholder groups, how do you measure the impact? So we're creating social impact frameworks, giving our client a sense of what their targets should be. We are enabling them to kind of use that information to understand where, if they're interested in buying future assets either in the same town, city, or in another country, what they should be looking for, not only just to have return on investment for them, but also what's called social return on investment. So it's possible. Social impact investors do it really, really well. We just have to find a way of applying some of those great metrics to real estate, which we're trying to do in the context of retail.
For us, sustainability is obviously implemented within our designs, so we can directly influence it. However, there's a big difference depending if we work on projects anywhere in Europe, London, as opposed to the Chinese projects, where it's still a big learning curve, and we're still trying to get there, but it's hard. So it's quite established if you're anywhere around London. Europe is usually even better than London, but it's getting there. And China, I'm sure, will crack it.
And go ahead, Barry.
No, I've got one word for me in terms of the answer to that question: poorly. I think the reality is the real estate sector is terrible, both measuring its impact on the whole sustainability agenda and in reporting it and measuring it, and I think it's getting better. And I think what reassures me is I think a lot of investors now are insisting that we improve, but I think we are 2 steps down a 10-step route at the moment.
And I'd say maybe to follow on that, occupiers are the companies that are really, managing their own office space and looking at energy costs because it's on their bottom line, lights, lift sensors, occupancy sensors, and we're working with, if it's not the real estate landlord because he has no incentive, he's not ultimately paying the service charge anymore. It's the people that are still paying for the extra costs that I think we need to all focus on, and the return on investment to prove that sustainability is not only going to save our planet, which should hopefully be enough, but unfortunately it's not. It's actually about saving money day to day, and that's the reality of the sort of nature of the industry I've learned. So yeah, we're trying to do a lot around loyalty and green points in terms of user experience and behaviors of buildings. But it's a big challenge. Buildings are 40% of global CO2 emissions. We all need to be looking at that. I think we have a question over here. Perfect.
Thank you, Vanessa. Just a quick one. Mohammed's question was fantastic about universal apps. And my name is James O'Donnell from Arup. We do a lot of smart buildings design, and one of our key issues is around specifications and linking up systems. I think the answer surely is about data standardization, so that you can actually have platforms and apps which are agnostic. I think just tap in. So you can walk in with your app or your system and walk into any building or any environment, and the data there, that data architecture is open and standardized. And then on the social piece, I think it's a really interesting community piece. And a question to the panel is around existing communities, obviously really interested in pollution and knife crime and poverty. Have you seen any digital tools, a little bit similar to the sustainability question, which are kind of tracking how your developments are impacting the local area and the local communities?
Great question, Barry.
It's a great question. I think yes. There are a number of. I'm trying to think of some good examples now, but there are a number of. There's some technology out there, certainly around the measurement of the social impact. I think there's some certainly around the security aspect and elements like that. Ways of assessing how safe an environment you're creating. I think there's some technology that allows you to do that, but I think it comes back to the previous point around communication, and I don't think we're very good yet at measuring, comparing and communicating, and perhaps that comes back to your point around the data, and actually, you know, when we talk about large communities that we are creating now, one of the things that we want to do, I am not a technology expert. The real estate sector will never be technology experts, so all we can really do is put the infrastructure in place to allow guys who are, people like you guys, to collaborate and work and solve some of these problems. And so our main commitment really is that all of our developments will be, whichever way they can be, open source effectively, so that we can allow people then like you with the good ideas to try and solve some of these problems for us.
Great. I think that, you know, let's all be more open source, and we'll end the panel on that note. Thank you very much.
Thank you.